Hello, BookTube. Today I want to talk about time and superheroes. The reason for this discussion is because I'm working on a superhero project for Camp NaNoWriMo. For those of you who don't know, Camp NaNoWriMo is one of two spin off events for NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, which is a writing event that takes place in the month of November, in which participants aspire to write 50,000 words of a draft of a novel. There are a whole number of rules and restrictions for NaNoWriMo proper, which are relaxed for the two Camp NaNoWriMos, which take place in April and the more appropriate July, I think, or it could be June. I mean, because normally Camp NaNoWriMo, you think of summer camp, and yeah, April is not in summer. But anyway, so for April, I'm writing a script of a comic book for a superhero story, my Scorpius story, which I've talked about before. But as I've been thinking about the project, and I've been thinking about the project for years, now that I'm actively working on a rough draft of the script, I'm kind of confronted by time and superhero stories and time and superhero comics. Because time is rather wonky when it comes to superheroes. So initially, time, I mean, and I'm no real expert in superhero comics. I like superheroes. I periodically get into collecting comic books, although I haven't actively collected comic books in 10 years. And a lot of my experience is more 80s and beyond. So earlier periods, I'm not too familiar with, but from what I can tell, initially superhero comics were were pretty much self-contained episodic stories with very little in the way of narrative progression between installments, except for the introduction of supporting cast and recurring villains. All that changed when, or for the most part, it started to change when Stan Lee took control of what would become Marvel Comics and really revolutionized the industry and the narrative structure of comic books, where comic books, superhero comic books, would basically there would be more narrative continuity between installments. So it was more of a serialized narrative that takes place over a longer period of time, months, years, decades. In this, what Steve Donahue calls the Stan Lee virus, became incredibly popular, and most superhero comics now pretty much follow it, particularly the corporate-led ones like Marvel and DC. Although I think there are still some holdouts for the more episodic, sort of like Archie. I don't think really, because I think they've been in high school for 50, 60 years. So I don't think there's much narrative progression there, but I could be wrong. I really don't, I mean, I don't know much about Archie. So anyway, so all of this explanation is largely meant to sort of arrive at my conundrum, which is how exactly should I deploy time in my own story? I mean, there's no question that it's not going to be sort of that narrative progression, sort of like the Stanley virus or Stanley mutation, um, because that's the kind of comics that I really like. I like that narrative continuation between that narrative continuation. But I'm not entirely sure how much time will pass. So initially, when I thought about Scorpius, I didn't. My first idea was to start with him as starting his heroic career in college. That he would wait until he was out of the house, like away from his parents, uh, away from his initial hometown, and just start him off being a hero in college. But gradually, I set that idea aside and moved to and sort of shifted to where he would start his career in mid high school. In the first arc, heavily features his older brother, who's a senior, who's a popular jock, and so that's sort of where it starts. So for this to work, Scorpius would have to be at least a sophomore. But the problem is that the big sort of narrative, well, not narrative point, but sort of the big storyline that one of the how did I call it when I talked about this the last time? One of the big storylines, the a turn I saw coming at the end of Scorpius's high school career. So he'd be nearing graduation. But the way things are looking, that's not too many chapters. I mean, it's not that far off. So that leaves me with a conundrum, which is how exactly do I work this out? Now, admittedly, like taking Spider-Man as an example, his high school career was, I think, no more than 50 issues. I think probably less than that, actually. Um, but I think most people probably see that as a mistake, given how often, particularly in adapted media, Peter Parker remains in high school. Um, so, do I do something similar where he's only in high school for so long, and what do I do with the necessary time skips? I mean, remember, um, comic books are, well, they don't necessarily have to be, but they're usually 25 pages. So 25 pages a month doesn't really show a whole lot. Or if, like, weekly, if, like, say, with manga, again, it doesn't really show a whole lot. So the storytelling is sort of constrained in that way. So what happens in those time skips, and how large are they? And as I began to write the story, sort of my issue sort of solved itself, because basically how it's going so far, I've got about, I think I'll start on the 11th chapter today. It's basically continuous. There's not much in the way of time skips, so that's putting me in a bit of a conundrum of exactly what to do with this later storyline that's coming pretty rapidly. So I don't know if when I come around to edit this, like do a second draft, if I should maybe move things up, shift the first storyline around a bit to make it work for an older Scorpius, or maybe move the big storyline from, rather than happening near graduation, more at the end of this current school year when he started being a hero, which is what I'm going to do. I'll do it that way, see how it works, because there are some interesting things that can happen. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So the plan is for me to basically a more constrained or a slower paced, I guess, storyline, like how long it'll take. So it'll be a bit, which is the nature of superhero. They can take forever. I mean, they do take forever, but anyway. And then bring that one storyline forward some, and then sort of work my way from there. And will report back. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do sort of the updates for this, whether in discussion videos that focus on whatever issues I might be having with the story at any given moment, or like a dedicated writing update. I mean, of course, I'm updating in this video, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, that's about all I have for now. I'll be back later this afternoon with weekly reads, which might be fairly short because it's only going to be 2 books, and nothing really to rant about or to complain about. Although maybe the look forward to next week might have some spice to it. I don't know. But anyway, so that's all I got for now. So thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon. And until I see you later this evening, stay safe.